Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles to Angelo Robles' Effective Family Office podcast, where I look to distill the best ideas and best practices of the world's most successful families and their family offices. I hope to provide thought-provoking opinions and feature amazing thought leaders to our listeners of the podcast with an eye towards the future of the family office. Today's podcast is titled AI and the Future of Financial Management for Family Offices. Now, we're actually going to begin the conversation with our special guest a little bit more broadly to set the foundation for AI and technologies, especially now as so much is happening with us needing to work remotely during COVID-19. To give some context, if someone hears this 3 years from now, we're late July here in 2020. And yeah, we're certainly in the midst of COVID-19 and lots of things happening and lots of developments and entrepreneurial things. So the world of technology, of AI, of VR, it's just changing rapidly in front of our eyes, so to speak. Many finance leaders within family offices spend too much time verifying the past and are getting bogged down by operational activities instead of focusing on strategic forward-thinking initiatives. We're going to be joined today by Kimberly Graham, Director of AI Transformation at Sage AI Labs, as she shares how artificial intelligence will play a role in financial management moving forward. A little bit about our special guest, Kimberly. Kimberly has been in the ERP industry for 20 plus years with a special focus on customer and partner success. She joined Sage, a significant public company, in 1999 and has held roles in marketing and customer service and success, including the position of Director of Customer for Life at Sage Intacct for close to 5 years. In her current role as Director of AI Transformation for Sage AI Labs, Kimberly's primary role is to drive customer success, product market fit, and commercialization for artificial intelligence features, as well as the internal transformation and upskilling processes within Sage. Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's nice to join you today.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. We have so much to discuss. Let's jump right into it. I'm going to ask you the most broad question possible, but I think it's important. What is AI? What is artificial intelligence to you?
Artificial intelligence is really a way of taking computers and data and actually doing things to help people with some mundane tasks, to help problem solve, to help think forward, and so forth. So it's basically not to replace humans, but certainly to aid them in positive ways.
I mean, basically, to some degree, that could come together to mean, can machines think? And I know if you use the word singularity in terms, we're not there yet in terms of our technology and AI. There are some that think we're just a couple of years away. The best guess estimates by futurists like Ray Kurzweil are probably closer to 2040. And there are some very smart people that think, wow, that's actually a really big ask, and it may be multiple decades. And who knows? And in terms of exactly what that means. In terms of when did AI first develop? I mean, we could go back to Alan Turing, the legendary technologist and kind of the early godfather, and there were several of them, so he wasn't the only one back in the 30s relative to with computers and technology, but certainly some of those principles, and if you watch the movie The Imitation Game, you'll understand. But that really came to be, at least coined, in the mid-50s in New Hampshire, of all states, I believe at Dartmouth with Professor John McCarthy. But if you could take us back into kind of the early days of AI and a little bit of, again, of setting the stage, I think that would be helpful for our audience.
Absolutely. So it was probably a very profound and almost crazy thought back then you could use technology to really supplement human thinking. But you're absolutely right. So back in the 50s, they had ideas of how they could apply technology in this particular field. It was great thinking at the time, but there were a lot of stalls because AI is very dependent on computer power, data, and at the time in the mid 50s, computers weren't ready for this technology. They weren't ready to literally do the thinking that they're able to now. It was really more dependent on input rather than actually doing calculations and so forth. So we've come a long way, but even though they had some great thoughts back in the early 50s, and some of that was precipitated by movies. I think I at one point read an article that even the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz was one of these initial concepts of just how to apply it. And so a lot of it was much more of the I hate to say kind of Hollywood thinking, but it just wasn't possible just based on where computers and technology were at the time.
Yeah, those are very good points. And actually, from Dartmouth College and McCarthy that I noted, primarily really a gentleman's named Newell and Simon were really one of the most innovative early innovators, more than just coining the term like McCarthy did, which was, of course, legendary to this day. Who doesn't know what the verbiage AI? And speaking of AI, also a very good movie by Steven Spielberg, actually one of my favorites. And that probably goes back 17, 18 years now. And it really took almost an eerie look into the future. Well, I don't want to give it away for those that haven't seen it, so why don't I leave that at that? So you bring up a good point. There were some really incredible, intelligent people that were doing great early work in AI, and there have been pockets from the mid-50s into the 60s, but there appears to have hit a point, like you hinted to, probably closer to the late 70s, where it entered into probably about a 10-year kind of winter period for exactly the reasons that you noted. The computer power just wasn't there yet. And that tide started to turn somewhat, arguably late 80s into early 90s, and obviously still evolving to this day, which takes us a little bit into understanding where we are now in terms of with AI. So I think when you mention AI to a lot of people, they probably remember back going, about 20 years ago to IBM being a leader in the field and the development of their Deep Blue, which initially lost multiple times to chess champions, I believe in 97, 98, and eventually beat, I guess it was Kasparov for the best that there was. And now it's a no-brainer. A high-level AI, no matter who you are as an individual, is always going to win. So then we think of IBM's Watson and winning on Jeopardy. Talk a little bit about the perception of the public, kind of what IBM helped to do to kind of bring it more to the forefront.
I think that a lot of what was initially done, like the example that you gave with IBM, and also even some of what you find when you just do some rudimentary research on AI, is a lot of what I would consider gamification. I think that the chess example that you used was a great example of more of the intent behind AI. It's thinking ahead, it's thinking dependencies and cause and effect and all of this. But I think that's probably one of the misnomers of AI, is that it's more of the gamification, robotics, self-driving car, and so forth. But I think that you're absolutely right. I think that the chess example was something that brought it home to people because they could understand. But I think that the opportunity that we have now is really to take the gamification element of it and translate it into what does it mean for regular people in their business environment and so forth.
Yes, and I'm thinking of the chess example that I gave. It's one of the examples I actually give in my upcoming masterclass on developing an anti-fragile family office. It's a very analytical and mathematical game. Henceforth, it's going to lend itself eventually, as it's programmed correctly, which eventually it was, to beat even the best of chess players. In chess, everything is in front of you. You're a player there, I'm a player here, the information's on the board. Where if you want to use another game example, poker, it actually is more like real life, where there's an element of luck and there's an element of reading emotional intelligence. And that is one thing yet until it reaches singularity, where AI has not been able to match quote unquote humans. But in games like chess, or even arguably more complex games like Go, many of us are familiar that the Google DeepMind, I believe it's called, probably arguably the AI leader at the moment, is incredibly powerful and seems to be expanding at all times. And really, I mean, you go back in history, going back even thousands of years ago with the abacus and people like John Napier a couple of hundred years back, and the advancements from refrigeration to Alan Turing that I noted. This all seems to be getting exponential. What Gordon Moore spoke about in terms of chips getting better every 18 months by doubling, it does appear like AI is following at the current moment, maybe not 20, 30 years ago, but right now, kind of a similar growth trajectory.
You're absolutely right. And that's actually something you mentioned earlier, the difference between AI and machine learning. That's where machine learning comes into play, because AI is the concept of what we can do with this artificial intelligence to help make decisions, recommendations, actions, and so forth. Machine learning is really what is behind the scenes, the application of learning from the data. So for an example, in the gamification that you mentioned, like with chess, through machine learning, the system is going to learn what worked and what didn't. And so if you ever do research and look into some of the, I would almost say like animated or visual descriptions of AI, one happens to be my favorite, and that is teaching how to a computerized car to park. And it goes through millions and millions of iterations, and each time through machine learning, it's course correcting and learning. And that's how AI works, is by through that learning process of the application and what's working and what doesn't, so that it gets a better result. That makes sense.
I mean, in the world of financial services, is it multiple users giving various inputs? Does it adapt to that at its central hub? Whether it's a DeepMind at Google or what Sage is doing. So it's somewhat learning reflective of the experiences of the users and the inputs that it's receiving.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know I'll touch on this later, but some of our initial features that are rolling out to production in Sage Intacct do just that. It learns based on the user activity and the interaction, and basically it will recommend actions. And based on what the user will do with that, it teaches a system so that it knows what's normal for that particular user.
Yes, so if it picks up something that's off of algorithm or use, then that may be a fraudulent use or something's wrong. And maybe Absolutely. It gives an alert depending on how it's set up, depending on the people involved in getting that. Mm-hmm. Still staying, we're going to circle back to that, but still staying on the bigger picture. And no surprise to anyone viewing or watching in, there are multiple opinions relative to AI. At the end of the day, you can't stop the march of technology. If we stop it here, then other countries will advance it and they'll have an incredible edge. There are some people that feel that those who control advancements in AI are kind of going to control the world. And right now, probably the US and China, no surprise, are quote unquote the global leaders. But that will be an interesting, I guess you could say, competition, if I could use that word. And there are some negative thoughts and consequences. I'll pick relatively famous people from each side of the fence. You have Stephen Hawking, who passed away a couple of years ago, that was gravely concerned about AI and how it's programmed and how it could potentially evolve. And you have a person who spoke at my events and on my podcast about 2 months ago, Peter Diamandis, co-founder of Singularity with Ray Kurzweil, that was incredibly optimistic. And maybe the answer is we don't really know. It may be somewhere kind of in between, but I don't want to make it a negative conversation about a massive loss of jobs and we're going to be caged animals and AI is going to take over the world. Give us a little bit more of a positive vision of the future. If you feel that way, if not, then let us know the negative.
No, I definitely feel that way. And I think that what's important to highlight is responsible use of AI. So first of all, I'm not a believer that AI will take over the world. I think that those who are passionate about this technology and who are trying to do good things with it, like we are at Sage, it's really to help people. And so there's also the element of responsibility when it comes to data privacy, security, and so forth. And as a SaaS company, a cloud computing company, we have to be very cognizant of that and very, very secure. And so everything that we're going to be doing as a company in the world of AI and machine learning is going to be with customers' best interest at heart. And so I think as we begin to roll out these features, I think that our customers will begin to realize that they can trust the features when they see what it can do to help them so that they can be more forward-facing in their functions rather than having to go through too many mundane tasks. I think that the trust will develop. But no, I think it's going to be doing great things. And I'm new to this field as of about 8 months ago, and I'm amazed at the opportunities that are in front of us, especially in financial management moving forward.
That's an incredible perspective to have. And yes, certainly the CTO of Sage is a renowned and very talented individual and making a great strategic hire in yourself with your vision and your experiences. I wish I could be quite as optimistic. I know it will be enhanceful, but to say the playing field is going to be level and other countries and people developing AI are going to have that same level of ethics and responsibility, I think is wishful thinking. I'm probably a little bit between Hawking and Diamandis, and I want to try to have more of the positive vision, but I also could paint a pretty ugly picture. We won't go into today. We'll have other speakers upcoming about the future of jobs. We actually did a podcast about a month ago that covered some of this, universal base income. There's lots to discuss, and it's a very touchy subject that we do not mind jumping into, but we have enough on our plate relatively in today's podcast to cover. So when I think of how AI and technologies are advancing, partially in the world of financial services, I look back to 10 years ago now to the advent of like robo-advisors, where I don't need an actual advisor. I simply go on, enter my data points, my information, and it chooses among a pre-selected group of asset allocation strategies and indexes. And maybe for some people that could have worked. It probably does a very good job at managing the potential tax outlook. So I think it's beneficial from there, but it has not raised a lot of money. I think it's been somewhat disappointing. And again, maybe the technology just wasn't there yet. A lot has happened in the last 10 years. What is Sage's opinion that we're now on the cusp of great things beginning to happen? It may have taken a little longer and to cycle down from a Watson or a DeepMind, but we're there now.
So basically, and by the way, I do agree with your point about like robo-advisors and so forth. There are certain things that at this point in time, I wouldn't necessarily trust myself. I think that people just need to look at individual technology and companies that they work with to make sure that it's something that's going to be in their best interest. And so what Sage is doing, and with our initial features, we're looking at and working closely with our customers and partners to understand what this would be, by the way, but what would help them. not to replace them, but what would help them do these mundane tasks, what would help them be more forward facing and to provide insight into the future. So we're not looking to replace people, we're looking to streamline things. And so I agree with your assessment that there are certain things to be cautious of with regard to like too much technology, but the approach that we're taking is features that make sense for our customers, if that makes sense.
Yes. And one of the biggest things that I've heard from family offices, often people that are going to be in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and I'm right in between that myself, so I completely understand, is we know we need to upgrade and get better at it, but it's not urgent at the moment, in the future. And then COVID-19 comes along and it forces being remote, the cloud technology, using whatever Slack or communication protocols, project management, aggregation, and generally, and this is going to be a good comment, generally what I'm hearing from around the world is, hey, this wasn't so bad. I should have done this years ago. And for the most part, in many white collar industries, including in the unique, intimate world of the single family office specifically, they're adapting pretty well. And there are many positives that I'm starting to see. So sometimes it takes an impetus. It's sad that it had to be COVID-19 to kind of push innovation to some degree with entrepreneurs, as well as simply comfort in utilizing it. But a big thing with these people, which is an advantage that like Slack has on communication, is it needs to be relatively easy. Mm-hmm. So I think of like the movie The Minority Report or Iron Man, where he's waving his hands and the technology is we're not quite there yet. I get it. But what's the ease of use to implement some of the financial technologies and AI? Is it still that you need to have a degree in computer science, or is it getting easier and easier?
Absolutely not. No, you do need significant education with regard to designing and implementing machine learning and AI. So we have a team, literally the Sage AI Labs team is set up to do just that, and to work with individual product lines within Sage to bring these features to reality. But with regard to the typical user, the benefit of using a system that has AI features embedded in it is it takes the guesswork out. Individual users don't need to know anything about AI other than what it can do for them. And so you also raised a good point with regard to like even the user interface. Our customer experience design, or what we call XD, and all of our user interfaces will change as a result of this. One of the things that I happen to love is the founder of Intact, who is now our Chief Technology Officer for Sage, actually loves to use the term Pacioli. Pacioli back in the 1400s was the developer of double accounting or double entry accounting, and so he was the founder. And so our code word internally is Pacioli, but it's basically as he demonstrates it, like through our user conferences and demonstrations, it allows you to actually see the different pieces coming together in various user interfaces. And so it's, back to your point, Angelo, it's not rocket science for actual users. The rocket science elements is behind the scenes with regard to the creation of the models and the algorithms and so forth.
And the user interface, I'm assuming, is only going to get better and better for exactly those reasons. Most people are not technologists. For them to use it, they need to see the ease of it, which is the magic of, Apple and their iPhone. It was convenient and easy to use. And the use of, I guess, a version of AI with Siri or something like that. And that is coming probably sooner rather than later in the world of financial management, where it might even be as easy as just a version of Hey Siri and talking. And I'm assuming broader, my bigger question, things are going to be incredibly different. I mean, I was going to say 15, 20 years, in 7 or 10 years.
I agree.
Is the whole financial services industry about to be completely remodeled 360 and all of it's going to happen in 5 or 10 years?
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, I've been in this industry since 1999. In fact, I joined Sage just 6 months before Y2K. And moving into this AI function, I honestly thought that it was going to be a challenge, because the reality is we do have a conservative industry. We have conservative functions within financial management. And through the work that we're doing with regard to customer development, customer feedback from our development efforts and so forth, and beta participants, it has astounded me how customers from different generations, from different types of backgrounds, are embracing this technology. And so, yeah, I think it's exciting to see for sure.
Help our audience a little bit understand. So there's the public company Sage, and I'm familiar in the family office world with Sage Intacct. If you could talk a little bit about that to help to tie it together to our discussion on technologies and AI.
Absolutely. So Intacct was founded back in 1999 by Aaron Harris, who is now the Chief Technology Officer of Sage. And basically, he had a vision that he wanted to address the problem that CFOs were some of the least aware people in the organization, didn't have access to data, didn't have insight, and so forth. And so, and by the way, that was a quote from Peter Drucker back in 1999. And so, you know, he was horrified at the thought of this. And so, Aaron Harris was one of the founders and developed Intacct, which was built from the ground up as a cloud solution, so software as a service. And it basically has evolved into one of the leading financial management solutions. And as a result of it being cloud-based, it's been very seamless with regard to COVID, shelter in place and so forth. You don't have the same concerns of an on-premise solution where you're dependent on IT and servers and so forth. And so, but also part of why we're able to roll out AI features within Sage Intacct, which was acquired by Sage a couple of years ago, is because it is built on the cloud, because there is access to data. And so back to your original question. So Sage Intacct, or Intacct was founded back in 1999, acquired by Sage several years ago, and is basically the leader within the Sage mindset with regard to cloud technology. And so a lot of our business with Sage will be moving to the cloud based on what Intacct has done.
And what you're leading in Sage AI, if you could describe that.
Absolutely. So the Sage AI Labs team rolls up under Aaron, who is the Chief Technology Officer of Sage. And one of the first product lines that we have been working with is Sage Intacct. And basically, the vision that we have, and we're bringing this to market, is basically with three initial core focus areas. One, which I know Aaron Harris loves to say is a profound thought, but it's to eliminate the close. There are a lot of mundane tasks that can be automated. And so, you know, hopefully through AI and machine learning, we can help automate that. So to eliminate the time involved in manual close processes. Another is continuous audit, which provides the trust factor. We have a feature that is in production for many beta participants right now, GL Outlier Detection, which is basically exposed through the approvals process in GL, and it's looking for outliers in data, account, department, location, amount. And what happens is it flags to the user through the approval process on what looks like it's an outlier, and it allows them to drill in and act upon it. Do they approve it? Do they change it? We're finding from our beta participants that it's really highlighting some errors. In other cases, it's bringing things to their attention that is confirming that, you know, things are working as they should, you know, such as new account setup and so forth. But through machine learning, based on the action that the user takes, the system then learns and applies that moving forward. So that's an example of continuous audit where and one of our initial features to basically take out some of the mundane reverse spacing. Another one of our visions is predictive insights for the future to help our financial leaders look forward. One of the pilot projects that we have for subscription-based companies, for an example, is predictive billing, looking at subscriptions and based on customer activity, providing a dashboard and predicting what their renewal rates will be. We can also use that technology to apply to predictive cash flow. We're working on bank reconciliation, bank feeds, bank statement imports, and so forth. So with those three core areas of eliminating the close, continuous audit, and also predictive insights, those are really the three pillars that are our main focus for this particular area. And those are the features we're currently developing.
I just noticed a text in saying, and sometimes it happens with industry talk, Angelo, what's GL? General Ledger.
General Ledger.
So certainly built upon the things that you noted that Sage and Sage Intacct is incredibly well known for, and arguably the world leader on complex multi-entity accounting, broadly accounting, and putting it in the cloud in general, cash flows, reconciliation. I mean, these are all very, very important things to not just multi and single family offices, but with families with significant holdings, entities, various trusts. And doing this manually, it's incredibly laborious and lends itself, unfortunately, because of the mundane nature, a part of it, to losing a little bit of focus and maybe not being as accurate as it possibly could be. Having it more automated, coupled with the advancements of AI, coupled with human eyes from inside the organization also looking at it, really could help eliminate a lot of errors. And the errors add up. And even if you don't look at just the errors, how do you simply be more efficient in managing risk, in cash flow? I mean, this is an incredibly important resource that I think, unfortunately, because we're using, general ledger and kind of accounting, it may be losing some people a little bit. And I think they're underestimating how powerful and how beneficial and proactive now, especially with the AI, that it actually is for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just the makeup of your audience here, just to just pull back a little bit, some of the features are basically geared towards day-to-day financial management, but then also, like when I mentioned, like the predictive analytics and so forth, that's really going to help our CFOs, VPs of finance and so forth look forward and predict based on past activity.
For sure, that's huge. What is some of the initial feedback you are receiving from the customers and partners about AI for Sage Intacct?
Funny that you ask. I literally just rolled off of a call about an hour ago. We're rolling out a Sage Intelligent Time product for PST organizations, professional services organizations. And it's basically an AI-based time tracking solution that picks up on activity of individual users and recommends time entries. And basically the feedback from that particular group was, don't take this away. I'm dependent on this. I don't want to go back to manual processes. This is helping me with time, with, just become more efficient. We're getting the same feedback from our GL Outlier Detector feature or beta participants. Specifically that it's drawing attention to things that need their attention, and it's allowing for them to build trust within the system because it's catching things that need their attention. So the feedback has been phenomenal. And again, the customers that I'm working with are embracing this technology rather than being fearful of it. And there's almost this realization, even in the early stages of betas, that this is really going to be time savers.
And yes, and again, a little sad that COVID-19 kind of had to push that along a little bit, but it did. And they're adapting. The family offices and businesses in general that aren't required to have a retail location, but a lot of the white collar businesses and finance are realizing that virtual and remote could work. And it's an opportunity now more that, but for that to work, besides being in the cloud, you really have to understand and grasp what is out there from technologies, from big data to AI to advancements in virtual and augmented reality, which I'll admit have been a little disappointing up to now, and we could really use it now. But what you're seeing when I talk to entrepreneurs and Silicon Valley, New York, Boston, LA, et cetera, and Israel is just wait. Within the next 6 to 12 months, major advancements and improvements in especially augmented reality and virtual reality. Basically, imagine something like Zoom, but where the ease of putting on regular glasses or a contact lens, it's able to make the other parties come to life to look like you're literally meeting them. We're not there yet. It's kind of a 2D world primarily, but again, this is something that will not take 5 or 10 years. And COVID-19, through amazing entrepreneurs and those funding them, including often family offices, is pushing that along very, very quickly. For someone like you to be active in something as cutting edge with a public company like Sage and AI, it must be a really interesting time to be thrown into that mix, to have the impact of COVID-19, and to feel like there's just so much going on. I mean, you've been in this industry for 2 decades now. Do you think the financial management industry is ready for this, ready for AI?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I have been just so pleased with what I have seen through COVID, other than the impact on, unfortunately, businesses. So for some of our customers, let's say with Sage Intact, where they have, they've had to adjust their business model. But from an overall management of their business, having a cloud solution so that people can work from their dining room table, their living room, their home office, and so forth. What I've noticed is that just the ability to be remote, the ability to be cloud connected from wherever, it's knocked down geographical walls. I deal with people all over the world, and it almost has pulled people together, because I think that prior to COVID, there was this thought that you had just, more of the buildings, more of the, the silos of organizations. And I think that it's just created much more of a web of work, regardless of where people are working. And so we've seen a lot of increased interest in AI, machine learning, and also just active engagement from our customers, just because they realize this is helping them so much.
In another text that came in, we did answer this, but it shows what I noted is kind of a fear of people that are not as digitally fluid. And that basically is, will this be difficult for users to implement? And
no.
In fact, it's getting better.
Right, absolutely. And I'm just going to paint a picture here. So the GL or General Ledger Outlier Detection feature that I mentioned is a simple matter of Sage Intacct customers going and checking a box on a configuration page. And that basically enables a service. And then the data flows. And so they view GL approvals, and basically the AI feature of GL Outlier Detection is basically the addition of a column on their approvals that will flag with an icon if something needs their attention. So it's almost a graphical interface that allows them to, it pops off the page, they are able to drill in. So I think where people get a little bit unnerved is with regard to the technology, but through companies actually rolling out AI, we're doing, like Sage, we're doing it in a way where it's basically transparent to our users. So you don't need to have the kind of the technical background. It's all basically displayed through a user interface. It's very seamless.
That's for sure. And again, getting even easier as it advances. Uh, Besides what you noted, what are some AI features under consideration? So not there yet, by Sage Intacct for family offices specifically to benefit from.
So what we're trying to do is some of the initial features like the general ledger outlier detection feature is obviously going to be what we would consider a horizontal or non-specialty industry feature. We're also looking at some other things that would definitely help family offices, such as predictive cash flows. As I mentioned, like with even like predictive billing of subscriptions, that's going to be easy to leverage with regard to understanding what cash flow and what transaction volume should look like based on the past. So with regard to projections, there will be some features such as bank reconciliation through bank statement imports, through bank feeds that will help automate very mundane processes of matching during reconciliation. And basically, we're continuing to work with our customers, partners, product management, and so forth to uncover really some of the pain points of our customers. And so we'll continue to be working with the Sage Intacct group to specifically identify those areas specifically for family offices that would help.
Yeah, I mean, we have one family office that really is adapting rather excellently during COVID-19 remote times, effectively becoming a virtual family office and really liking it. And they actually, it appears, will be implementing a combination of these strategies, by the way, Sage and Sage Intacct, are going to be important for the reasons you noted, the multi-entity, the accounting, the cash management, et cetera. A company that I am familiar with called iPlatin, which is a blockchain platform, kind of a digital vault for family offices, coupled with various aggregation and reporting. And the pricing for that is also getting better and better. What all of that allows you to do, to some degree, arguably, to do more with less, but to be more efficient, to free up your time on often mundane tasks that these are not going to make mistakes on. They're going to mitigate your risk better, and they're going to allow a chance for you to make better, more informed decisions and to free up time for some of the more creative tasks that right now AI can't do, that needs to be done internally. So there's, again, in trying to go from being negative half an hour ago to being positive, at least for now, I don't know about 30, 40 years from now, that there are some dynamics that are occurring that are going to be very, very powerful inside the family office community. If I could go back to being a little broader on that, the COVID-19 times allow an opportunity for an employer to have a global workforce. People don't have to worry about, in theory for now, commuting. Meaning, now where that could be important, if I'm in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, or New York, my real estate costs are very, very, very expensive. This may be beneficial to me with that. And I may also have to pay people more money to work in these communities. And now they have an opportunity where the world is their oyster and vice versa. Employees can now say, do I really need to be an analyst and live in New York or Greenwich for a hedge fund? Can I live in the Keys in Florida or in Idaho? And speaking of Idaho, and this came up so randomly yesterday, Kimberly, where do you live?
It was so funny. I was speaking with Angelo yesterday, and he mentioned something about the internet connection for today. And, you know, as long as you're not in the woods of Idaho, and it's like, funny that you say that. Because 2 years ago, I relocated from Orange County, California, to Hayden, which is a suburb of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I'm telling you, I have like great internet connection up here. But to your point, Angelo, it's cloud computing and being able to work remote. We experience that with our team. I work with people all over the world, and location just does not matter anymore. And so what we're finding, and I'm being very kind of candid here, organization. I mean, we have satellite offices like in San Francisco, for an example. We probably will be not renewing those leases, for some of the satellite offices, just because this time of working remote has proven to be so successful for us.
For sure. And the fallacy, which is based on a different era in manufacturing of 9 to 5, and the reality is the actual productivity in work is probably closer to 2.5 to 3 hours. That's been proven. So the fallacy that, well, if the employees are remote, they're going to goof off all the time. They still have to meet and exceed their expectations. Otherwise, they won't make it. In some ways, it's going to be more challenging for them managing business and personal life, especially if they have kids. And they're going to find often melding into the weekends, into the wee hours of the evening. So my experience is no, they're very concerned about their income, their jobs, about keeping pace by being digitally advanced. And they're not going to goof off because you're going to hold them to a certain standard. There's always going to be some exceptions and you'll get rid of them. But this is, it's not just let's get a vaccine and things will be back to the old normal again. Nothing in me or the billion-dollar families that I talk to, admittingly, some of them in tech, feel that that is going to happen. This is going to be the new way moving forward. Much of it potentially is more beneficial and provides greater opportunities for the employer, admittingly, but for sure, the employee as well. And it's a chance to work on your hard skills and your soft skills. And the soft skills, as advancements in technologies get better and better, become more important. Listening, emotional intelligence, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, decision-making. I mean, those are all things that we could all work on. We're heading into really, really interesting times. It looks like Sage and Sage AI and Sage Intacct is certainly on the cutting edge and really has tremendous leadership. You've had, being in this industry for so long, I mean, you have opportunity, but this is a company that you really double down on. You're leading an important division now. How do you feel about the company, the leadership, the board? This must be something you greatly believe in.
Oh, absolutely. And it is a different company than it was, 21 years ago. I have to say that I am so pleased with Sage. I loved the culture of Sage Intacct. I would say that the culture that was just embedded within Sage Intacct was something I'd never experienced. And I honestly thought I'm going to retire with this company. We were all marching to the same drumbeat, but there was always this focus on customers, customer centricity, do the right thing, and so forth. So when we were acquired by Sage a couple of years ago, I came full circle and I came back to Sage. And I have to say that I have been so pleased with the leadership. We have a lot of very candid exposure to our executive committee, which is basically throughout the world, through basically town hall meetings, open Q&A sessions, and so forth. And I can honestly say I'm going to retire with this company. I have never felt stronger. And yeah, I'm very pleased to be part of it.
The single family offices I know, especially truly significant ones that have great complexity in entities they own, various corporations, trust, and complexities, Sage Intacct is the dominant leader that, in my experience, is 8 out of 10 use relative to these kind of services. I believe there's going to be a proliferation of SFOs for a variety of reasons. In the US, the potential tax enhancements, as we learned in Lender versus the IRS, make it potentially more beneficial than ever. Clarity on guidelines of how to structure a family office. Conflict-free, control, privacy, customization. What was lacking was technology and efficiencies made it burdensome and complex, and that has gotten so much better the last couple of years. And again, somewhat sadly for other reasons because of the devastation of COVID, but this is pushing along these big data, AI, augmented reality, machine learning even quicker. What was going to happen, it was inevitable. is now going to happen much, much sooner. And that was basically kind of the discussion that me and Peter Diamandis had about 5 or 6 weeks ago. This is an exciting time. This is an opportunity for families to make an impact, to make a difference, and to utilize what's out there in front of them now. Oh, one more comment I want to make from another text that came in. I guess I have too many friends that are listening, but somehow they're not shooting it over via the Zoom. And that is, and I understand this because of my age, I'm 54. Angelo, I'm kind of concerned, all this digital and technology, is it going to leave me a little bit in the dust? Are there advantages to having a little bit of fear with the under 30 millennial crowd and the Generation Z, especially when they come to authority in the family, but are they a good addition inside the family office currently? They are going to be more native with technology. They're going to look at problems differently, and I think there are advantages to that. But let me stand up for people that are in my age bracket. We bring experience. We bring a cool hand during a challenging time that we're going through now. My experience with the youth, amazing with digital, and very important. They should be integrated. You want them to challenge authority, to think of things differently, to speak up. But sometimes, because they haven't experienced downturns, they could be a little reckless. And that's been a challenge that I've seen. So that is why you want to have a sense of various cultures and balances, including with age, because they each bring something broadly different to the table. Does Sage take a similar perspective in terms of having a diverse workforce?
Absolutely. And by the way, I'm 54 too, so
Okay.
we may as well be twins. So I agree 100%. And, you know, it's funny, I used to see more generational differences in previous roles. And I'm seeing that less and less now, especially with all of the remote work going on now. Sage is very diverse. And Sage Intact in particular, because this is the company I just came from, focuses less on generation and more on culture, which is, I think, a real sticking point, because I think that different generations bring different things to the table, as you alluded to. And so as long as we all have the same mission, the same culture, the same work style, and we're all pulling in the same direction, I think that generational differences are actually a complement to each other. And
for sure.
Yeah.
And for those that would like to find out more about you, about Sage or Sage Intact, at least using you today initially as a little bit of a conduit, how could they learn more and how could they reach you?
So I am available on LinkedIn, or my email address is kimberly.graham@sage.com. So it's KIMBERLY.GRAHAM@sage.com. I'd love to hear from you, especially if you have any questions about either anything I've shared or have ideas that would potentially help family offices. I believe that Diana was going to plug something into the text or the chat as well with regard to the website that you can go for more information.
I will do that right now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Diana.
Excellent. And again, everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm host of Angelo Robles's Effective Family Office podcast on Spotify and Apple. This will be produced as a video as well, which usually would go up on our YouTube channel. That simply is Family Office. So we recommend you go there and subscribe as well. And as I noted, I've been in this industry a long time. Things are changing rapidly. I'm nothing but always impressed by Sage, Sage Intact, Sage AI. Deanna, who's on it now as well, and Kimberly are amazing resources. And this is the company that substantial families with entities and enterprises are using. It's more effective, it's more efficient, and it's a valuable use of the time and creativity of your organization. And you don't have to be, it's nice to be, wouldn't we all want to be a multi-billion-dollar family or enterprise, but even going downstream a bit, it's a tremendous opportunity. This is a very, very valuable resource that I can't recommend enough as family offices and family enterprises are more remote and looking to be virtual. This is the direction. It's not going to go back. And this is a company at the forefront. We highly recommend you have a chance to reach out. I'm going to actually read Deanna's email now for those that would watch this or hear this on a podcast as opposed to seeing it on video. And it was up on here it is. It's DIANA period ERM as in Mary, IN as in Nancy, I at sage, SAGE.com. And Deanna is my main contact at Sage Intact, which is the aspect of Sage that more likely in the scenario that I described, multi-entity accounting, cash flow, reconciliation, et cetera, is going to be the branch of Sage that's going to be most common for a family office. And she's amazing. We highly recommend you have a chance to reach out to her. Kimberly, you've been a great guest. We greatly appreciate your time. And everyone, my day job when I'm not doing videos or doing podcasting, which appears like it's been my day job more during COVID-19, but I'm the founder and CEO of Family Office Association, a global membership organization dedicated to the interest of families of great success in their family offices. We do a tremendous amount of original proprietary content, now more than ever during COVID-19. We host global programming, which is on hold via COVID, but we're more active than ever, doing a lot, like about probably 170 plus a year, or on that pace so far, for online digital events, which is every week having great guests, including what we had today, and people like Jeremy Grantham and Peter Diamandis and some other monsters of the community in philanthropy and business and finance and politics. So it's been really an engaging time. We encourage you to potentially learn more. We're very active on social media. Website is FamilyOfficeAssociation.com. I promise that new site by August 1st should be up, and it's tremendous. It's going to be a lot of fun. And my email is angelo@FamilyOfficeAssociation.com. Thank you all today for being a part of the live program. Thank you all that would watch this on YouTube or hear it on a podcast. And Kimberly, thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest.